Welcome to the podcast, Authors of the Pacific Northwest, where I connect authors with their readers. We also talk all about the author's inspiration, their journey to publication, and the authors will educate me and you, the listener, all about the business of writing. I'm your host, Vikki J. Carter, also known as the Author's Librarian. Hi there, listeners. It's the host and producer, Vikki J. Carter here of this podcast, The Authors of the Pacific Northwest. And before we jump into the episode, I wanted to stop real quickly and share with you the newest project that I'm working on. If you are an author, I think you might be interested in it. I have a YouTube channel that I just launched called The Author's Librarian on YouTube. And on that YouTube channel, I am going to share with you free accessible resources that you can use to help you with researching. I'm going to give you tips. I'm also interviewing librarians, and I'm writing a book to help authors with researching. So I hope you find me there on that YouTube channel. You can find the link in the show notes. Now let's get to the program. Hi there, podcast listeners. Thank you so much for coming back to the Authors of the Pacific Northwest. And today I'm going to present to you one of my new friends, Indy, and we are actually, this is take 2 on this recording, so I'm going to admit it to my listeners. We did a wonderful interview a while back, and somehow it didn't record, so we're doing it again. Is that fun? So Indy, say hi to everyone.
Hi, everybody. Good day.
And Indy, your last name is Indy
Quillen.
Quillen, thank you.
It's an Irish name, yes.
Yes, Irish name. So, okay, Indy, so tell us a little bit about yourself, starting out with where are you located in the Pacific Northwest?
Yes, I'm actually living in Snohomish County. So I'm close to the Sound, and I'm also close to the mountains. Lots of woods, lots of trees, green belts. Just love it up here. We're in what's called the convergence zone so we never know what we're going to get for weather.
Yeah.
But it's exciting that way. And love all the trees. That's my favorite thing.
I was going to say, you probably love it there because you're a tree girl, you're an outdoors girl. So
yes, very much. Love
and being able to be by the Sound and the mountains and seeing all of our beautiful forests, that's just one of the most amazing things to have all that in one area.
We're still exploring it. We've only been up here 3 years. And then with COVID, it's been really tough to get out there and camp as much as we want to. So we're going to do a lot of exploring, some more exploring this year, and get out there and see more of this beautiful state. Yes.
Awesome. Well, I have read your book. I've read one book. I know that you're working on additional books as well. And I love it. And I was drawn to it because it's an outdoor, its setting is very much in the outdoors. So tell us a little bit about your background of your outdoor life, because you are very fascinating to me. So share with our listeners all about your background.
Well, yeah, I guess when you read the Foxwalker novels, you'll get the distinct idea that I love being out in nature, spend as much time out there as I can. And my maternal grandfather, is the one who got me interested in nature at a very young age. He started teaching me the names of plants and flowers and birds and showing me how to follow tracks or make tracks in the snow. And so from there, it just went on and on through my whole life. But I also became very fascinated with the Native American culture when I was just a young girl. Had some very vivid dreams that set me to reading every book I could find. And it wasn't until years later that I found out through my family that my grandfather, the same one who was the outdoorsman and taught me so much about the nature, was his great grandmother was Native American and came to the Midwest from Virginia. And I don't know what nation she was from. But I have a sugar bowl that was hers that she carried on a wagon all the way across the country. And then my grandfather was also great friends with a Native American gentleman. And we only know his name is George. I don't know what his real name was, but he gave my grandfather a beaded wampum belt that I have. And my paternal grandfather, every time he plowed up his garden every year, he got arrowheads. We lived in the Midwest, and so I have tons and tons of artifacts. So I did lots of studying of Native Americans, and I became very fascinated with the spiritual connectedness with nature. And that resonated with me. And so when I created my character, that all just came into play. And then about the time that Tom Brown Jr. became known as a tracker, I read every one of his books. I became fascinated in bushcraft and wilderness survival. So it was just all of those pieces and parts that fell together to help me create a completely fictional character that I could, portray these stories through, of being connected to nature and knowing how to survive in it or thrive in it versus surviving in it. And so that's how these stories kind of came to be.
I love it because your whole life was research for this book.
It actually was, and it's not stopped. I just finished 8 weeks of courses with Wonia Thibault from Alone, learning more bushcraft and buckskin sewing and hide tanning and weaving and all these things that I've always wanted to know my whole life and just never had a way to learn it. And with the pandemic, the one side benefit was that Wonia was able to take her classes online. And so I was able to take these classes. Well, all of that is just playing in more and more to these stories because I want my stories to be very authentic, and everything I do in the stories out there in the wilderness is things that, I've done or experienced. And so it's important to me to be authentic in my writing.
I love it. So I want to go back just a little bit about that online class. Did she send you materials, or did you have to go find materials for hands-on projects?
Yeah, a lot of it, we would actually go out and get the materials ourselves. And then she did have some kits for like the buckskin sewing, some kits that we could purchase. Although I've already purchased a hide from a gentleman. In the cold, I couldn't tan a hide. But I've purchased a hide that I'm going to use for a project. So some of it I had to go get the materials, and some of it, we were able to get them. So it was a mixture, and it was such an intense course that it's going to take me a long time to get through everything and really try everything. But
that's absolutely fascinating.
It's just been so fascinating. And so, I've always had organic gardens, and I've raised my own food and done canning and preserving of foods. That part I knew, but it was all these other ancestral skills that our ancestors knew. We wouldn't be here today if our ancestors hadn't known how to survive. Mm-hmm. And all those skills are being lost. Yeah. And I think it helps us connect back with nature. And I think a lot of people have done that this last year, is realize that we have to get our connection with nature back in there to get rid of the stress and to feel like we're part of this world and not separated off into a room with technology. Yeah.
So true. So true. I love it. And once again, now you're living research again. You went through all those classes. And since I've read your book, I know kind of what the theme you're running in and along. I'm sure that all of that stuff you did in your class is going to be interwoven in some new stories.
Oh, yes. Yes, I already have I'm working on book 4 right now for the Foxwalker novels. And there's quite a few mentions of buckskin sewing in there. So yeah, it's all going to fill in. But people that read my book seem to be, they love nature and they love being out in the wilderness with Foxwalker.
Yeah.
And I'm hoping it makes them want to be outdoors more.
It did me.
Yeah. Oh, good.
I think I told you this last time. I have had this big run of wilderness mystery, wilderness tracker, or wilderness or forest mystery type authors on all around the Northwest. And a lot of them have based their books in the Northwest. I think I got one person on and then you all followed because I was like, this is so great. And I've been actually reading the books, which is really exciting because I slowed down this year to read the books of the authors that come on. Also, I'm writing my own book, which will be out very soon. I can't wait. My first book.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Self-publishing. I'm in the midst of launch process and I'm just about ready to. Well, I'll just put it this way. I know why people don't get books out. It's a lot of work. But anyways, the theme of the wilderness and particularly wilderness mystery isn't something that I would have gone and looked at because I have a real serious fear of finding a dead body in the wilderness when I go hiking. I mean, it's not a joke. It's a legit fear. And so it's not something like I'm not running to these books and saying I want to read about this, because I really think that someday this will happen. And if you are in the Pacific Northwest, you probably have that thought often when you go hiking. It's just one of the right. So let's talk about the process of these books. The first story, did it come to you in a dream? How did it come about? And then what's your process for writing? Do you sit down and write the whole story and then go back and change things? Kind of walk us through that.
This first book, it took me years and years and years to actually have it all pulled together. And it was just all the different elements that we've talked about, me being out in nature and learning things and being fascinated with bushcraft skills and wilderness survival. And, my husband, he laughs because every time we go out camping, you have 50 ways to make fire without matches, but those are all things that just fascinate me. I think all of that just came together in a very odd way because I didn't really have a clear idea of what the plot line was going to be. I just had more the setting and characters and what I wanted to portray. So it took me a long time. And, the only way to learn to write is to write. And so it took me a long time to write that first book. And even then, it wasn't even anywhere near as what it is now. It was a completely different story. So once I had it done, I'm like, now what do I do? And I started going to writers' conferences. I had 2 people, strangers, within 2 weeks tell me to go to this writers' conference. It was a Southern California Writers' Conference. I was in Southern California at the time. And I thought, okay, 2 strangers telling me to go here, I better go. So I did go to the conference, and boy, talk about deer in headlights. It was just, there was so much that I didn't know. And that helped me realize I had a lot to learn. And so I started going to all the conferences I could get to. And I took workshops and classes, and I submitted my sample chapters for editors. Well, first I submitted to other authors to get feedback. Then I started having agents or editors look at it. Then I started having agents look at it. And so it was through, probably 3 or 4 years of going to these conferences and rewriting my book and actually learning how to write. When I wrote my book, I didn't know anything about plot lines or point of view or, anything. So I learned a lot. And when I finally did start submitting to agents, I was real fortunate. This was back in 2010. I went to a conference, and my book that I was pitching won Best Fiction Award for the conference. And I had 3 agents ask for the full manuscript. And one of them, the gentleman from New York, pulled me aside and he said, "Will you give me first read? I really love this book." And we spent dinner together that night talking. He basically was interviewing me. And he read my book and took me on. And I thought, okay, that's it. I'm done. I've got it, wow. Okay, cool. Success. Not realizing how much I had to go yet. And that first book, Tracker, it got great reads, multiple reads at some of the big houses. One house, and I don't really want to name names, but one house basically said that he really wanted it really bad. He loved the writing, loved the character. He saw it as a series, but he thought it was going to be too small of a story because the main character was Native American. This was before today's, diversity.
That would not have been an issue today.
Yes. And then another house, a well-known house there in New York, actually said that if I had submitted the book 10 years earlier, they would have picked it up with no qualms at all. But everyone was concerned about how to market it. Everyone loved the story. They loved the character. They loved the writing. They didn't know how to market it. And so finally, my agent, very wise, told me, write the next book. Wrote the next book and got it out. And they all loved it just as well. They still cared for the character. They liked the writing. They still wouldn't bite because of the marketing. So I talked to my agent and I said, you know what? I really love these stories. He goes, I do too. And I said, I think I'm going to put them out myself. And he goes, do it. Put them out there yourself and send me your next book. and just keep that process going. And what happened in that process is learning how to, I call it indie publishing, because to me, self-publishing is when you do everything yourself. I wanted my book to look as professionally published as possible. So I hired the best cover designer I could find. I had professional editors, professional formatters. I got book blurbs from other authors to put on the back. I have my own publishing company and my own logo, everything. I did everything I could to make this book as professionally published as possible. I think that is key. Key.
Yeah, it is.
If your cover doesn't attract someone, they're not going to open it up to see the great story inside. So I did all this, and I got that first book out, and then I followed up with the second book and started going on with the third. And in the process of doing all this, I realized I'm kind of a control freak, and I really like being able to do all this myself, to have the cover design I want, to have the title I want, to put them out, as often as I want. I can control all the marketing. I can see all my stats. I know when I'm going to get paid. It all just fell into place for me because I've had my own business for years. And so this just became another business for me to run. And so I have not gone back to my agent. He said he was going to be my agent for life, but I have actually really enjoyed doing this. And things are changing in New York so fast, I can't even keep up with it. And so I actually have a lot of authors who are traditionally published that have pulled their books and they're now self-published.
In the trend of 2020-21, right?
Yes. And so,
figuring it out. Now, will we say it's easy? Absolutely not. As I am discovering, this is not an easy process because I decided I was going to do indie as well. After 2.5 years, over 100 interviews with authors, and I finally just said, enough is enough. I need to get some books out there. I get asked every day when a book is going to come out from me. and I just decided to jump in with both feet. But it is probably the hardest learning curve I've had. And I've done podcasts. I've done all sorts of things. I'm enjoying it, but it's a learning curve. That's for sure.
It definitely is. And the only way you can learn it is to jump in. And what makes it so difficult, really, I think, for every writer, is there is no path to follow. There's no set of guidelines that says, do this is number one, this is number two, because everybody's going to have a different experience. Everybody's going to react differently. Everyone has different strengths and weaknesses. And so what works for me isn't going to work for you. What works for you is going to work for someone else. You have to find your own path. You have to find your own way. And I think it's great that some authors are doing both. They're working with houses in New York, and they're also publishing their own. CJ Lyons, she does. There are a lot of people being very successful with that. So would I never publish with New York? I'm not saying that, but what I am saying right now is I really enjoy what I'm doing. I like having control over it, and but it is you do have to do the work.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot. It is a business.
And that was probably the best advice I heard. I don't know if I heard it from somebody on my podcast or I was interviewing, or I heard it on another podcast, but it might've been Joanna Penn from the Creative Pen, who I follow and I've been following for years. She talked about that your books you should look at them not as just your babies or things that you love, but it should be a product. And the minute my mind put that idea into a book being the product of something I'm doing is like changed my whole mindset. I was like, oh, I can handle that, right? I'm okay with having people edit. I'm okay with having reviewers read it ahead of time. If it's a product, I need feedback because I understand that business aspect of feedback. When it was just a concept of something that I loved and I wrote for me, I had a hard time letting go of people reading it. So very interesting.
you have to switch from the creative process to the business. And and I have certain ways that I do that too, is when I'm in the business mode and this is what I get done during this hour. And then I have to switch to being in the creative mode and the writing itself. And you do have to be able to do that. Yes.
Well, you have nailed every single one of my questions without me asking. I love it. did have practice pre-recording one time.
Yes,
right?
I don't even remember what we said. It was so
I don't either, but it was a lot of fun.
But it was fun.
That was the sad point. But I'm not perfect, so I make mistakes. So why don't we get into the book title, the series? Tell us all about that. I've read it, listeners, and I love it. And I usually don't say I'm going to love something. I don't say it. I'm very honest. So if I don't like a book, I'm not going to come out and say I love it.
Oh, well, thank you.
I really did love it. And what I really enjoyed about it the most was that I felt like there was a lot of research in it. Now that I know you, and I know that's research from your life growing up and the things that you loved, it makes it even better for me.
Oh, cool.
So
awesome.
So share with us, Indy, the titles, the whole series overview. And then when you're ready, you are welcome to launch right into the reading for us.
Oh, okay. And if you want me to, I can elaborate too on my writing process if you want me to do that.
Oh, yeah. I think we missed that, didn't we?
Yeah. I think we
go back.
Kind of gloss. Do you want me to do that first?
Yeah, let's do that first.
Okay.
Yeah.
I know a lot of people, have to do outlines or they're pantsters or whatever. And what I have found intriguing is that every book has been completely different.
Oh, that's exciting.
and frustrating, because after 2 or 3 books, I'm like, okay, I've got this down. Okay, yeah. I know what I'm doing now. I've got this process. I'm just going to dive in and go. And what I did on the first 2 books that I thought was working really well was I would write out all my ideas about my characters and what might be happening kind of loosely and stuff. And then I would create this timeline of what had to happen in the story. And I would type it all up. And then I would, every time I got ready to do a new chapter, I'd look at my timeline and say, okay, what has to happen next? And do I need 1 chapter to do that, or 2, or, what do I need to do to get there? And that worked really well. So I got ready to do the 3rd book in the Foxwalker series, which was actually my 4th book to write. It didn't work. And I got to what I thought was going to be the ending, and it was like the middle of the book. And I'm like, well, that didn't work. Okay. And I struggled so hard with that book and had to redo my whole process. So then when I started book 4, which I'm on now for the Foxwalker series, all of a sudden I found that nothing that I'd done in the past was working. Nothing. I've handwritten the first 8 chapters by hand.
That's unheard of these days.
I know. I mean, I started out that way on book 1, but not for my other books. So I just couldn't sit at the computer and do it. I had to handwrite it, and I would write each chapter like 8 times, making it better each time. And I don't know if it's because I just felt like my brain was in a fog from the COVID year and I just couldn't focus. And so doing that just helped me get everything back out into focus. And after writing about 8 chapters by hand, then all of a sudden everything started clicking in. And I'm like, okay, now I think I can write out a timeline. Now I can go back to what I'm used to doing. But for some reason with this book, I had to just sit and handwrite things to figure I guess maybe get to know my characters. And I have Foxwalker in a different environment. That's his challenge, this book, is he's in a different environment. So I guess I kind of had to experiment and play around to kind of figure out what was going on with this book.
I think that's so exciting, though, because, I mean, I know there are people that have a process and they stick by it and they can just produce with
Oh, yeah. I admire those people. Oh,
I know. I envy them. They're like, 12 books a month. 12 books a year I've produced. And I'm like, I can't even get 1 done. I don't know how this is possible, but they have a set process for themselves. But I don't know if I'll ever have a process for myself because I love the fluidity of how my characters come to me. And I have several different book ideas. So I constantly have book ideas from different series floating around in my head.
Exactly. Yeah.
And that's the hard part for me, is like, okay, I got to get one thing done, then I got to move on to the next one. So I love that process. So you inspired me that it's okay that sometimes it's not going to be a process for each book. It's not going to be the same process for each book.
No, and I actually, besides the Foxwalker books, I actually this last year, 2020, I actually published a book I'd written 3 or 4 years ago, and I was never quite happy with it. And it's a romantic suspense, and it was a story I just wanted to tell, and I finally got the idea that what I wanted to do was change it from 3rd person point of view the main characters in first person, and the other characters are in third. So I had to rewrite the whole book again so that she was in first person. That is not an easy thing to do. And in the process of doing that, and I had some people beta read it, and I changed the ending. When I got done with it, I really was happy with this book. And so I went ahead and put it out. Now, this is a completely different genre than I've ever written in, and it is not one of my Fox Walker novels.
Yeah.
But it was just a story. Like you said, there was characters in the story I wanted to tell. And so I had to get it out there.
Yeah.
And so that went out this last year. Well, that made me falling behind with my books. I've been doing one a year for Fox Walker. And so I'm really far behind because of taking all these classes with Wonia. And so I'm like,
it's all research.
It's all research. Yes. So I'm working very diligently. So the first book for the Fox Walker series, well, the romantic suspense novel is called Reputation. Okay. And even though it starts out in LA, in Malibu, it quickly ends up in the mountains of California. Oh. And it's a fictional town, but those people who live in California will know it's based on Idlewild. And so little, artisty kind of little town. And so my character actually ends up spending a lot of time in nature there. But that one was tricky to write because when she first starts out, she's not comfortable in nature.
Oh,
this is a foreign place to her. And so to write her character was kind of difficult for me. So then she, learns to love nature. So that's really
what a great story. I'll have to go get that one and read it now.
Yeah, you'll like it. So the first book in the Fox Walker series is Tracker. And that's where we have the introduction of Fox Walker. And basically, we learn a lot about him and his skills and his spiritual connectedness with nature, a little bit of his background. And we meet the character Natea, which I won't say too much about. So since I'm going to read for this. The second book, Pursuit, that was a really fun book to write because I thought, who could I pit Walker against? It would be such a challenge. And so he's basically trying to search for an escaped convict in the National Forest who is a former Navy SEAL who specialized in wilderness survival amongst many, many other, talents. And so, he's got an equal out there.
Trust me, I got to read this one because
yes,
I have a very, very good friend who is ex-Navy SEAL, also survivalist, who had a TV show about it.
Oh, awesome.
When you told me about this one last time, I pictured him.
Awesome.
He's not a criminal, but
no.
I pictured him.
I can't give away anything, but
No, but it would be hard to track somebody that knows what they're doing.
And knows how to set ambushes and booby traps.
Exactly.
So I really had fun writing that book. I think it's still kind of my favorite, but just because of that cat and mouse aspect out in the wilderness of two men of equal skill. But what I did in that book is I showed the difference in philosophies with being in the wilderness and how it worked for each person. Yeah, and there's no right or wrong. It's just each different. So
very cool.
The third book is Duplicity, and that one was really different. There were a lot of different for that book. Walker does spend some time out in the wilderness, but in this one he has to. We have a lot more of Natea in there, but in that book he has to kind of deal with the ugly underbelly of civilization a little bit more than he ever has to, and dealing with that. And there's various plot lines going at the same time in that book.
Oh, interesting.
So, and then the fourth one that I'm working right now is going to be, the name is Astray, and it's about a missing person. But this all takes place in the North Cascades. So Walker's in a different environment than he's used to, and he has a search and rescue person that's kind of there with him against his will to be a help. And so there's he has a lot of challenges in this particular one. And the missing person isn't really missing. So, she's astray. So
awesome. Fantastic.
So I'm going to read just the beginning, just a few pages from chapter 2. So the setup for this is in chapter 1, of course, you get to meet Foxwalker. And Deputy Harris from the Sheriff's Department comes out to his cabin to ask for his help. And what has happened is there's been an unsolved mystery in the area. And one of the little local newspapers keeps writing stories about this, a convict hiding out in this woods. And the people that own this property are talking about seeing a spirit walking in the woods. And the sheriff says, let's go out there. Let's search the area. Let's prove there's nobody there, so that these reporters will get off my back and let's move on. And so he's been told to meet the search party and help them out. And so this is where I'll start reading from there. Chapter 2, Gray's Forest, Colorado. The next morning broke cloudless and bright. The aspen trees were at the height of their glorious transformation, golden leaves quivering against the dark evergreen backdrop. Above the tree line, the San Juan Mountains filled Foxwalker's vision as they marched across the southwestern edge of the Rockies. Bumping along the road in his truck and heading into a wooded area rumored to be harboring a fugitive, or worse, it never occurred to Walker to feel apprehensive. This mystery needed an answer, and he meant to find it. If someone really were hiding in the woods, there would be fresh tracks somewhere, and he would find them, and after finding the prints, he would find who made them. This wasn't an arrogant thought, just a simple truth. He was a tracker. It's what he did. Although the local townspeople viewed this particular section of the wilderness as eerie, giving it a dark reputation, Walker's ancestors had for centuries considered Mukayosugape a place of mystery and spiritual power. They mourned its loss when it became privately owned by the Gray family, and had to resort to secret journeys there. Over the years, the treks into the forest dropped in number until grandfather and Walker alone made the visits to the area. When his truck rolled up behind a line of vehicles parked at the edge of the woods, where Harris had asked him to meet, his eyebrows rose. Damn, enough people here to hold a tribal council, he muttered. He opened the truck door, stepped out, strode over to a group of deputies gathered around a lanky, middle-aged man, and listened in on the conversation. He saw a few faces he recognized, including Harris. He ignored the puzzled glances from the men he didn't know. Have your teams report in on the hour, the chief deputy ordered. Remember, the search and rescue team is working a section of the woods directly north of us. Unless you hear differently, return to this point by dusk. That should give you enough time to penetrate the forest to the center and back, on the west side only. The chief deputy looked up, made eye contact with Walker, turned his attention back to his men. Depending on what we find today, we will begin searching tomorrow from the opposite side of the forest. Walker watched in silence. He already knew that calling him in on this search had been the sheriff's idea, not Morgan's. Being told a meeting time later than everyone else confirmed how Morgan felt about it. The chief deputy approached him as the other men made ready to begin the search. Foxwalker? Yes, Walker extended his hand. The man gave him a quick handshake. Chief Deputy Morgan, I realize you've conducted independent search and rescues for Sheriff Kimball in the past, and you're used to working alone. Walker nodded. That's all fine and dandy, but this time you'll be doing this directly under my leadership. You're here because the sheriff wants you here. You have a problem with that? Walker met Morgan's defiant glare without blinking. I'm here to honor the sheriff's request. The moment lasted a heartbeat longer before Morgan looked away toward his officers. So you know the situation. We don't know if someone really is out there or not. But in the unlikely event there is a fugitive out there, we need to find him and bring him in. He looked straight at Walker again. The sheriff is anxious to clear up the mystery and put this to bed. I understand. You carrying? Morgan asked, his hand going to his gun. Just this. Walker indicated the knife sheathed at his side. Morgan looked at it and shrugged, not hiding his smirk. Whatever works. I don't suppose you have a cell phone with you? Something to check in with us? No. Figures, Morgan muttered. I prefer smoke signals, Walker said. Morgan eyed him and then continued. Well, if we miss seeing you back here end of day, I'll ask that you check in at our office and file a report. No problem. Morgan jammed his hands into his pockets, looked away a moment, then faced Walker again. You and I have never worked together before, and this search could take days in order to cover the entire force. So I need you to understand one thing. We'll get along just fine as long as you take care you don't get in the way of my men out there. You understand? You can be sure of that, Walker said without smiling. Morgan turned and strode away. Kunan, Walker muttered to himself. The man acted like a young badger, full of aggression, but with no understanding of the true power he possessed. Walker looked over toward a group of deputies standing within hearing distance of the conversation. He saw Deputy Harris among the men. Good to see you again, Walker, Harris said as he stepped closer. Sorry about the mix-up on the meeting time. I didn't know until too late that Walker moved it up. Don't mind me. Don't mind him. He's just marking his territory. Yeah, that's what badgers do. Walker nodded. Me, Harris said. I'm glad to have you aboard. Leaning against his truck, Walker watched the deputies scatter into the trees and undergrowth, equally spaced and heading in an easterly direction. He reviewed what he remembered of this portion of the forest. Foothills bordered the vast tracts to the east, desert-like plains to the west, and because of this, the area contained a wide variety of vegetation. Walker listened to the noisy passage of the deputies drift further away. Deep within Mukaya Sugape, south of this position, there were many streams and a few small lakes. If someone were indeed hiding out here, that region would have the most resources, and a fugitive would have ample warning if a search party were moving through, especially this group. The deputies were searching the wrong area. He was sure of it. Well, Morgan did ask him to stay out of his men's way. He opened the door of his truck, reached in and brought out a pair of moccasin boots and an ankle sheath containing a knife, one smaller than the hunting knife at his waist. He removed the worn leather cowboy boots and stowed them in the truck. Once he strapped on the ankle sheath, he slipped on the deerskin moccasin boots. One last check to make sure the pocket of his jeans held his flint, and he headed south into the trees. He always traveled light when tracking. He could move faster and more stealth. Nature would provide him with everything he needed. He passed through the outer edge of the woods, breathing in the heavy scent of evergreens and fallen leaves. The aroma triggered a memory of long ago, the day when grandfather first took him to Mukaya Sogape. Even at the age of 8, he understood the visit would be one of significance. He and grandfather had stood at the edge of the dense woods, the smell of damp earth, leaves, and pine filling their senses. He remembered his excitement being tempered with his apprehension of the unknown. He could hear the white boys at school chanting their favorite rhyme. If you walk beneath the trees, watch out for the ghosts of the dead. Your soul they will surely steal, and the forest floor will be your bed. Grandfather had only said, knowing a fact is not the same as experiencing it, and stepped into the woods, leaving him to decide whether to follow or not. A lifetime later, he didn't regret his decision. Grandfather had taught by experience. Every spare moment of his youth had been spent discovering the secrets of the natural world. The teachings gave him roots of stability to counterbalance his struggles in the white man's schools. As he matured, the lessons went beyond awareness and wilderness survival and delved into the deep realm of the spiritual connectivity of all things. That's why he inherently understood this search today had purpose. His intuition confirmed it. The sun set high in the midday sky when he found the first sign that someone did indeed wander Mukaya Sogape, and not a ghost. The markings in the dirt indicated a digging stick had been used to gather some sweet cicely plants. He could tell by the traces of charcoal left in the dirt. The person would have chosen a sturdy sapling and bevel and fire hardened the end. Pushing the stick into the ground next to the plant, they would then pry upward, at the same time pulling on the plant from above. An effective technique for collecting the entire plant, and all parts of the sweet cicely were edible. The fact the stick had been fire hardened and used this way told Walker the person knew something about wilderness survival, or at least about edible wild plants and how to gather them. It made him reevaluate his notion that if someone were hiding out here, he might have an accomplice bringing food to him. Could it be one of his people? As far as he knew, no Ute apart from grandfather and he had bothered to come here for many years. Maybe the fugitive story was true then. A murderer at home in the wilderness? A shiver ran over his skin at the idea, and the sheriff wouldn't be happy with the news. Walker searched the ground for footprints, but found nothing clear enough to read. Still, he did have a trail to follow, for even without prints, he could see where someone had passed through the area. Years of observation had trained him to read signs in nature as easily as most people read street signs. Disturbed soil, broken twigs, and overturned pebbles on the forest floor became a marked path for him. He moved forward with added caution, and within an hour came upon his first set of clear footprints. Judging from the moisture content of the compressed soil, these were fresh prints, made within a few hours' time. Even at first glance, he knew something looked different from what he expected to find. He squatted next to the prints for a closer look, then set back on his heels. "A barefoot woman," he muttered. The size and depth of the depression indicated the prints belonged to a small-framed female, a woman, out here, shoeless and alone. What the hell?
Awesome. I love that part. I'm like, yes, keep going, but no. Seriously, readers, you got to get this book. It's very, very good, and you want to find out what happens to him. It's very interesting. So thank you for sharing that section with us. So Indy, as we start wrapping up this podcast episode, would you like to give a tip to somebody that's like me, who's now currently in the process of publishing her first book, Indy Publishing? Any tips for me or listeners that are in the same boat I'm in?
That's a good, I'm trying to think real quickly here. Besides, if you're just starting out, go to conferences, meet other writers, get a writers community that you can, of course we can't do that right now with COVID, but you can do it online even. Meet other writers, talk to them, find out what they're doing, grow your community. I learned so much from other writers, and I still stay in contact with so many of my writers. That is where you learn all the different ways that, people are doing things. And it helps you. The more you can see what other people are doing, the more you can find what works best for you and find your path. And do a lot of reading, research, find people that you feel are giving you good information, and follow them and keep track of their blogs or whatever they do to communicate with people. So finding your path is the most important thing. And something that I do want to tell people is, so many people wait to build their online presence until they have a book published, which is the worst thing you can possibly do. You need to start building your online presence, a website, social media, and start finding who your readers are before you ever have your book out there. So that when your book is published, you've got people already waiting to buy your book, to start your fan base. And then just the other thing is, in today's world, I think readers really like to get to know you. Mm-hmm. They want to know more about you. They don't just read a book and then move on. They if they find an author they like, they want to know about you. And so give them ways to, leave reviews for your book, contact you. I can't tell you how many people I've had contact me because of what I write in my books, that people who know I've had some kind of training out there and experience, and so it gives you good feedback that they believe the authenticity that you're putting in your book, and you want that. So keep working away at it and meeting people and trying to learn as much as you can. A book that I really, really love that is on writing, that's just a small little book. It's called Invisible Ink. And it's written by Brian McDonald. It's a small, little, tiny book. Quick read, fun read. And it has a lot to do with story, in that he believes that our brains have been programmed for many years on the whole theory of how we do fairy tales. Mm-hmm. Once upon a time, And if you follow those little steps that our brain wants to see or hear in a story, then your reader will feel satisfied when they read your book because you've hit all those marks. And so I think it's a valuable little book to read. So
great. Well, I'll make sure that's in show notes. Yeah. So not only myself, but everybody else can get it, and on my website, because I have a resource page on my website. So that's a great
awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Well, thank you so much for all the tips. It's all true, energizing. I appreciate it. I'm so glad that you could be here and share the Walker series with us. So listeners, jump on the show notes, get a hold of Indy, let her know you heard her on the podcast, buy her books, and also write a review if you do buy the books and read
yes,
them.
Please.
I can't stress it enough, right? Just a couple little lines of how much you loved it, but definitely write the review. So Indy, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate you doing take 2 with me.
Well, thank you so much for asking me. It's just been a pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the podcast. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did. Make sure you jump on the show notes and find the author, buy their books, write a review. And most importantly, you can find out more about me and my projects at one of my two websites, www.squishpin.com or theauthorslibrarian.com. And until next time, this is Vikki J. Carter, the Author's Librarian, signing off.